What I really have an issue with is every show is always a negative black guy, black men who can't have any kind of positive relationships with their women. What we got on TV now? 4 shows. We got Power, we got Empire, How to Get Away with Murder, Scandal. Do you got a black man that have a good relationship with a black woman anywhere on any of them shows?
So seeing a healthy male-female relationship.
A healthy male-female relationship, just a healthy male in general. It's always a negative image. With our music, it's always a negative image. That's a huge problem because people are influenced by what they hear and by what they see. So I wrote the 6 A's of Manhood for African American men to combat that because we need to have an image of what does it look like to really be a man? If I'm a young man growing up to be a man, or I'm an adult male and I never really had proper guidance, what does it really look like to be a man? Where do I get that image from if I can't see it on TV, if I can't hear it in my music, and if I don't have anybody that's around me that's displaying it? So I said, you know what? I'm going to take on this undertaking and I'm going to write about it. So, well, before I wrote about it, I was speaking about it. For about a year, I was doing something I called challenging men to be men. So I was going around and I was speaking and talking about challenging men to be men. And I was speaking at my church actually. And my pastor, he's a real structured guy. So he heard what I was saying and turned every point into an A. So it was accept your role as leader, answer the cries of your community, alleviate the stress from your women, assume your God-given purpose, be available, and my favorite is never abdicate. So those are the 6 A's of manhood. So within that framework, it will show you what it means to be a man as concerning how you act as an individual, your own personal integrity, how you act with your women, how you act with your children, how you act with your community, and how you act for your race. Because in my opinion, you can't call yourself a man if you're not building for your race.
So, I think a lot of people that watch the show, they're watching. A lot of us don't have guidance. A lot of us grew up without fathers in the home, and it's there's a lot of definers in terms of what that coming of age is. Every culture has a rite of passage. So, how did you come into your own sense of manhood?
Rough like everybody else. I grew up, I had my mother and my father in my life. In fact, my dad is Mitchell Chance Sr. I was a junior. 10 years old, my dad was killed on my front steps while I was in the house. So I dealt with a lot of trauma. After my dad was murdered, he was the breadwinner. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. So now all of a sudden we go from having my dad's income to my mother who wasn't working with 3 kids. And, so things changed drastically. So by the time I was around 13, we were really poor and I ended up selling drugs. And so I went down this long spiral in the streets being basically the antithesis of who I am today. I was just negative almost to the core. Everything that I speak against, and not from a place of judgment, but from a place that I understand it because I've been there. I was that negative person. And then for me, I had a spiritual experience, which prompted me to start going to church. And when I started going to church, I changed, So I feel like, God had a very a big part in, changing me. But my thing was once I changed, remembering how I thought, remembering how crazy I was, remembering the way I would respond to things, I said, man, I gotta help other young black men who think like that. Because it's easy for somebody to look at a young guy who just killed 3 people and they just want to lock him in jail. They just want to say he's just evil, and nobody wants to even try to figure out why he did it. Now, this is not the condone murder, but I understand because I've been in a place where I really didn't know right from wrong. Now, some people might disagree with that, but what you see all the time becomes normal. What becomes normal becomes acceptable, and what becomes acceptable becomes your way of life. So the same way young Caucasian children was watching lynchings lynch parties every day, it becomes normal to you and it's acceptable. Even though it's wrong, you don't really feel it as wrong. So there's a bunch of different factors that will go into a guy killing 3 people. Now me, I want to know what's going on with his life and how can I help that? Because just locking people up is not going to change it, because we've been locking people up. We see what 13th, we see what mass incarceration is. Has that decreased violence? Has that decreased drugs being sold? No, because nobody's dealing with the whys. All we're dealing with is what's. In the 6 days of manhood, I speak to the men about that. You have to in the chapter Answer the Cries of Your Community, I tell them the first thing you have to do is recognize these negative actions as cries. Not just he's a murderer, he's a drug dealer, he's a hoodlum. You got to see the craziness that these young guys and these young women are doing as cries, and not just cries, but cries for you as a man to answer. So it's for me to be able to see these young guys on the corner and for me to walk up on the corner and have a conversation with them. Again, not from a place of judgment, but I got to talk to them. I got to expose them. So now this is what I do when I go down to the corner, because I live in South Philly. Go down to the corner, the young guys out there, I always point them to the buildings downtown. Look at that. Somebody owns that. I never thought about that. Yeah, it's somebody walking around with a blue suit that own that building. All of those, somebody owns that one, somebody owns that one. And then I just start showing them random stuff. It's a millionaire off of these. It's a millionaire off of this. It's a millionaire off of this. It's a millionaire off of these. And now I begin to expand their mind. Like, yo, I never looked. I didn't even think about it like that. Now, after some time of me talking to them, they coming back to me with ideas. Yo, what you ever think about this? You think this is a good idea? I answered the cry. And that's what the man is supposed to do. He's supposed to see it and say, well, listen, I got to address what's driving you to do what you do. I can't address what you do. That's like just continuing to wipe a nose and you're not giving somebody some antibiotics. And that's what we do. We deal with symptoms. We don't deal with the problems.
So the next day.
The next A. Well, that was the second A. Okay. So to back up to the first A is accept your role as leader. I believe every man is a leader in his own way. Now, every man might not be Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. Every man might not be me in front of a camera or in front of a crowd speaking. But that just because you're not in front of a crowd speaking don't mean you're not a leader. Every man is supposed to, one, lead his family and be in a collaborative effort, lead his block with the other men. See, that's what we really lost. We don't have these guys that are leading their blocks. So they're not exposing people to what their standards are for this block. And they're not enforcing it. When I was young, certain men, just the thought of them being around, if somebody was smoking some weed or something, you're going to hide. Oh, here comes Mr. You step back. You don't curse. But once the men stop exposing others to what their standards were and enforcing them, it went from hiding and smoking weed to smoking weed right in their face to blowing it when they walk by. All because the men haven't accepted their role as leader, as an individual leader, and also as a collective leader. So when we have more men on our blocks leading the block that they're on, and then another group of men leading the next block, and then the next block, and the next block, we eradicate all the issues that are in our community if our men accept their role as leader. So we're going to answer your cries of the community. Then the next one is to alleviate the stress from our women. Our black women, I applaud you for everything that you do, because you are amazing, you are powerful, you are brilliant, you are beautiful. And I apologize for black men putting on you more than you should have had on you. Our women have stresses on them that other women of other races and ethnicities don't have. The first problem that we have is we have too many men having children and not taking care of them. Then that leaves for the woman to try to be the mother and the father. That's an extra burden. They have their own men in competition with them. I hear all the time, well, black women are doing this at higher rate than black men, and they're going to college and they're starting businesses. And why are we comparing what our women are doing to our men? We're supposed to be doing this thing together. But the problem is we have did our women so wrong that they have just put us in a category with all their other adversaries and just treat us like we're them. Instead of us working together, we are our competitors. And that's another stress on our women. So whatever we can do to take the stress off of our women, we have to alleviate. even though we might have been in the streets and acting crazy when we were young, a woman, because there's a laundromat on the corner of our block, a woman from the block couldn't carry her laundry. As soon as you come out your house with that laundry, somebody's carrying your laundry. If you come in with some bags from a corner store somewhere that look a little heavy, somebody's carrying your bags. So even something just as little as that, but just having a mindset that whatever I can do to take the load off of my women, I'm going to alleviate that stress. So we go from alleviate the stress to assume your God-given purpose. I believe all of us were created for something. Everybody has some kind of purpose. And in this capitalistic society, it seems like purpose is shunned. Nobody's looking for something purposeful. Everybody's just looking for something that's monetary, because we're just focused on it's a dog-eat-dog world, and I got to make more than the next person. It's all individual based, because when it's individual based, you just want anything for the I. But purpose never deals with you. See, what I'm purposed to do is never about me. It's about somebody else. So we're shunned in this country from purpose because they don't want anybody, especially black people, focused on what they can do for the next black person. They want us to be all individualistic. But the moment we are saying, well, what is my purpose? What am I supposed to do? How am I supposed to pour into the next person? That begins to destroy the oppression that we face, because we become a collective. See, we're oppressed as a collective, but we begin to try to fight it individually, which is why we lose. We got to become that collective. So we have to figure out what it is that I was created to do. How was I created to impact the world? How was I created to impact my race, my family? What was I created to do? I got to get out of this idea of being involved in the American dream, because when the American dream was created, we were slaves. So that dream don't got nothing to do with us. So why are we chasing an American dream if we're not even American? So we must, as men and women also, but the book is just geared towards men, we must assume that purpose. We must assume that God-given purpose, because when you assume that purpose, you begin to change everything that's around you when you step into that purpose. The next A is to be available. We have to be there. We have to be accessible. We have to be tangible. And not just physically, but we gotta be accessible and tangible emotionally. It's time out for us men working and just going home and sitting in our favorite seat and just watching TV, and we're not there emotionally for our women. We're not there emotionally for our children. We got to get out of these ideas, especially man to son. It's so weird, right? That, like, I have a daughter, 12-year-old daughter. Until the day my daughter dies, it's going to be acceptable for me to grab her, hug her, kiss her. But at a certain age, very young age too, I might add, if I show my son that kind of love, they begin to tell me, he's too big for you to be doing that. Now, I can't even give my son, I'm not available to give him a masculine energy. I'm not available to show him a masculine love. And when we're not available to do these things, now he's growing up missing something. And the only love he can get is a feminine love, which we need the feminine, but we also need that masculine love. So we have to be available for every aspect of always ourselves, our wives, our children, our community, and the entire race. This thing, it always has to tie back to everybody. We cannot, I always tell people, you can't spell yours without ours. So if I got to focus on how I can get everybody else to make some money or to be comfortable, because I feel like if I'm the only one on the block with an 80-inch TV, it might just be a matter of time before somebody's climbing in my window. But if we all got TVs,
I hear you.
Who wants to bother me?
Did we get through all the A's? Or?
No, one more. We'll be done. Sorry if it took a little too long. The last A is to never abdicate. And to abdicate means to renounce your throne. See, we came here from being royal, being kings, and then we became niggas. We became colored. We became Negroes. We became thugs, hoodlums, gangsters, bosses, all of these different things. that does not take us back to our royalty. And when you abdicate, see, the thing is, in the Bible, it tells us that, God gives us a power that makes us immovable. And the word immovable in the Greek means cannot be moved by an outside force. So it means you can trick me into moving, but you can't move me if I stand my ground. So I can't remove you from your throne, but if I get you to call yourself a nigga as opposed to a king, then you have abdicated. You have renounced your throne all on your own. And too many of us have abdicated. And it's time for us to look at ourselves as kings, especially in contrast to nigga. Now, I know we say it's a term of endearment and all of that, but I always ask me, well, what does nigga mean? I know exactly what it means if I call you a king, but what does it mean when I call you a nigga? And so I make it a point to call men kings, to continue to speak to them, to speak that into their life, to understand that you have kingship in you. One little quick story just to deal with this. I always go to a lot of youth stuff, doing workshops and talking to them. So I deal with this topic. And so I always just randomly walk up to a young black guy and say, "What's up, King?" They always look at me funny. I'm like, "Why are you looking at me funny?" Like, I mean, my name ain't King. I say, "I understand that." I said, "But how would you feel if I walked up and said, 'What's up, my nigga?'" I said, "I mean, I'm used to that." I said, "So are you telling me you'd rather be called a king than a nigga? I mean, you'd rather be called a nigga than a king?" And they always stop and think about it. I say, "Damn, you're right. No, I'd rather be a king." And that's how we get our men to stop abdicating, to recognize when they've renounced their throne and get them to pick it back up.